Good morning, Chairman.
Morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Environmental Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Adrian Finlay, the Chairman of the Committee. The Committee's Vice Chairman, unfortunately, Councillor Raymond Whittaker, cannot attend today. So in his absence, we will start. I'd like to move that Councillor Chris Reeve is appointed as Vice Chair for the meeting, for this meeting only. And is there a seconder? Councillor Robinson, thank you. Do we have any other nominations? No. All those in favour? Thank you. Councillor Chris Reeve, could you take your seat, please? Thank you. Before we continue, there's a standard announcement. If a fire alarm is we will leave the chamber through the doors, go into the front car park and await further instructions. In addition to welcome all members to the committee to this meeting, I would also like to welcome Councillor Danny Brooks, Executive Councillor for the Environment, and Councillor James Bean, Executive Support Councillor for the Environment. These and other participants will be introduced when each or their item when they first speak. This meeting is being recorded and will be loaded onto the website in full later today. Your comments will remain accessible online during the meeting. Just a couple of housekeeping announcements before we begin. Can I remind everyone to ensure your mobiles, laptops and iPads are all on silent. Item 1 of the agenda, apologies for absence and replacement members. Joe, do we have any?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Thomas Sneath to be replaced by Councillor Belly Robinson and Councillor Ray Whittaker.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of members' interests. Do any members wish to declare any interests? No, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting on the 7th of November 2025. To confirm as a true correct record of the minutes of the last meeting of this committee on the 7th of November 2025, and the minutes are found on pages 5 to 10 of the agenda pack. Can I ask for a proposer? Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour? Do you wish to speak, Councillor Carrington?
Yes, Chairman. Just with regard to the accuracy of the minutes. We had a really good discussion at our last meeting about solar panels. I think it was as part of the greenhouse gas emissions report and what we as a council were doing to put solar panels on buildings. We had some mention of this in an officer report, and we had a lively discussion about making sure that this council covered as many of its roofs as was possible with solar panels. Now, my recollection of that, and I think there was support for that across the chamber, Chairman. My recollection of that is that we specifically said to the officers that we'd like them to come back with a much more detailed programme than the one they had given. Now, forgive me if I'm missing anything, but the closest I can find to a minute of that is on agenda pack page 9, where it says members wish to express there was positive ways to address climate change and hoped that a proactive approach, funny grammar, would be adopted. I think it was far more than hope. My recollection was we instructed officers to go away and come back at some point with a proper programme detailing what this council would do to put solar panels on its roofs. Now, I thought that was generally supported, but it is not reflected in the minutes, sir.
best way?
Yeah, if that's what the committee wishes to happen, I can edit them.
Yeah, do you wish for the minutes to be edited?
Yes, Chairman.
To reflect that.
I think it was the general will of all the members of the meeting during the meeting and indeed in discussions after it. So yes, I would like that amendment if that's possible.
I know you're requesting an update from the officers.
Definitely.
Yeah, we shall put that within the minutes then. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Chairman. Yeah, right, sorry about that. Item 4, announcements and updates. This is a standard item on the Scrutiny Committee agenda, enabling announcements to be made. As Chairman, I have no announcements. And can I ask the Executive Councillor Danny Brooks to present any announcements? Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to waffle on too much because I know we've got a packed agenda, but I just wanted to bring up 2 or 3 items. Due to the success of the reuse, we've now we've asked all councillors to go out to any charity organisations for anything that they may be able to reuse from our household waste recycling centres. So far, we're talking to 22 organisations, so we're hoping that that's moving forward. The consultation on the waste satisfaction consultation, that's finished on Christmas Eve, and we had over 2,000 replies. The team are now wading through all those replies to come up with efficiencies and how we make things better for our residents. Onto flooding, we have 3 Section 19 cases ongoing. We've got 2 unconfirmed at the moment new cases after the recent storm, and so far after the rainfall last night there is no new cases as of yet, so the weather is being kind to us again. The campaign about food waste, that is being ramped up now in anticipation when we do get the start on it. And in the natural environment, the public consultation on our statutory local nature recovery strategy will begin in February, and following the outcomes and the draft strategy will be received by this committee for scrutiny prior to adoption by the council. And that's me. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks.
I'm happy to take any questions, by the way.
Do we have any questions, Councillor Brooks? No, thank you. Can I ask if there's any lead officers have any announcements, please? No, thank you. Item 5, update from the Risk Management Authorities. I would like to welcome our flood risk partner guests. Morgan Ray, Area Flood Risk Manager for Lincolnshire, Northamptonshire area of the Environmental Agency. Unfortunately today, Matt Moore from the Anglian Water has put his apologies, and Carl Vines, Area Manager of South Holland Internal Drainage Board on behalf of Lincolnshire Internal Drainage Boards. We also have the County Council's own flood and water representatives to respond to any questions, which is Chris Miller, Head of Environment, and Matthew Harrison, Flood and Water Manager. We will take each presenter in turn, beginning with the Environment Agency, but I urge that questions are strategic, focused, and overall delivery. If you have any questions of highly localised nature, for example, on particular villages, streets, or locations, please email Chris Miller directly so he can then pass them on to the relevant agency. First, could we have Morgan? Good morning.
Morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, thank you for inviting us along today. I wanted to give a little bit more in-depth overview of our maintenance programme and how that's allocated on an annual basis today. Last time I gave an overview, a very sort of strategic overview of each of our activities, sort of like maintenance activities, our capital flood risk management activities, our incident response, and some of our strategic programmes. But this time I want to concentrate on our maintenance allocation. Some of you who might sit on the Anglian North RFCC may have seen an element of this, so apologies if any of that's repeated, but I thought it was worth coming along to the committee because I know my colleague from the IDB wants to talk about maintenance in a little bit more depth as well, so I thought it was useful to have that today. Apologies for not providing a paper today. It coincided with preparations for Storm Goretti last week, which was a priority for us at the time. Thankfully, the worst case scenarios which we were predicting didn't come to pass. At one stage, we were predicting over 30 flood warnings. So, as a reasonable worst case, I think we ended up with about 2 in Lincolnshire. So, thankfully, that didn't materialise. But Joe, I think you've probably got a presentation for myself sort of queued up. So, hopefully, if you want to go on to that. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide, please, Jay. Okay, so this is our accounting area. It's Anglian North RFCC area. So, as I said before, we split the country up into various different areas. This is our patch for accounting purposes. It includes parts of North Lincolnshire, North East Lincolnshire, Northamptonshire, bits of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So that's our area for accounting. And we subdivide that area for our asset management purposes into asset systems, and each of those is assigned a consequence. So from sort of a low consequence system through to a medium, through to a high consequence system. And we base that on the matrix there. So, for example, in the bottom left, we've got minimal housing, little or no housing, commercial and industrial land, and negligible risk to life. And if you look in the sort of the top right, all the way through to the sort of high consequence system, where the impacts on people of property are high density housing, commercial, industrial property, land use A and B, and the impacts of people, little or no warning, no evacuation time, that sort of thing. So that's how we split our whole sort of geography up into those patches. If you want to go on to the next slide, please, Jay. So every year our operational teams, our asset management teams, make an annual estimate of the following needs. So we look at the minimum needs of each of those systems. So that's the lowest unavoidable cost to maintain statutory compliance. It might be electrical compliance, might be sort of safety compliance, that sort of thing. For example, we can't leave sort of exposed electricity cables. We have to follow sort of electricity regulations and things like that. To make sure there's a minimum need for those systems is identified. We also have an identified need, so that's any sort of investment above that minimum need. It might include frequent maintenance. So I think if you remember the last time I came, I showed that sort of pie chart of all the different sort of activities that we undertake. And intermittent maintenance, which is happens less frequently than once every 5 years. So it might be things like refurbishment of a sluice gate, for example, that sort of thing. And then we've got sort of unscheduled work. So this might be things that the field teams sort of discover on their sort of patrols on the way around. They might find a blockage on a grid, for example, which they'd remove, or small blockages in a watercourse, for example. We go on to the next one, please. This was just a couple of examples from this year. So on the left is an example of frequent maintenance. So that's more routine sort of maintenance. So it's sort of a weed cutting on the River Bain downstream of Horncastle, and that was carried out by the Witham 3rd IDB under the Public Sector Cooperation Agreement. So it's a watercourse that we maintain, but we pay the IDB to do that. Similarly, on the right, more of an intermittent task, so that's sort of dredging of the River Nene, just slightly outside of this area, but they were good pictures, and the fens, what you do in one part of the fens impacts another, so there is a positive impact on Lincolnshire there. Go on to the next one, please, Jay. So once we've identified all those needs, we put that assessment into our national team. So our national office get assigned the money through grant and aid through to the Environment Agency. So the annual sort of maintenance bill, if you like, for the Environment Agency, or the amount that we have for that allocated, is around about £200 million. So we bid into that, essentially. And the national teams allocate that based on the benefit-cost ratio of each of those systems, the sort of types of work, any sort of obligations, which I've sort of talked about, the flood risk associated with particular assets, and if the channel, or whether, the sort of the type of channel, whether it's lowland, pumped, etc. So they go through those criteria, and they allocate that accordingly. We also receive a large enough allocation to cover our field team costs, which is important for things like incident response and being able to operate our assets. So within that, so we just go back one second, Joe. Yeah, thank you. So for 25-26, our assessment of the need for all of those systems was £26 million. After the allocation process, we received for the following year, our assessment is £26 million. Our indicative allocation is around about 11.14. Actually, I think it might have gone up slightly by about £800,000 since we put this together, but of that order. So less than half of what we identified was we were allocated based on the availability of funds from a national perspective. It's not the end of the story. We'll go on to the next slide. So this is, we do have additional local funding which we can allocate to maintenance. So we've got the IDB precept, which is the money which we bill, if you like, the IDBs. So that's money for managing water that comes from the IDB districts into the main river system. We've got the general drainage charge, which is levied across the Anglian North area to sort of homeowners and businesses, etc. And we've got local levy, which is the RFCC, the Flood and Coastal Committee. That's the money that we can raise from local authorities within the area, the higher tier local authorities. You can move on to the next one, please, Joe. So a similar sort of principles for optimising that local funding. So again, try and make sure that the field teams are adequately resourced, and we do follow this order: legal obligations, unavoidable operating costs, frequent funding of high-risk consequence systems, followed by frequent maintenance of medium consequence systems. Then we go on to intermittent maintenance of high and medium, and then finally it's allocated to low consequence systems. So we go on to the next one, Joe. We can see what impacts that have. So the map on the left is the map we saw previously. So that's all the different system consequences. The map on the right is a different key, but that shows after the first tranche, if you like, of national funding, which systems are fully funded, which are partially funded, which are minimally funded, and unfunded. So the green, if you like, is fully funded. The more darker red ones are sort of partially or unfunded, is the sort of the maroon colour. If you go on to the next slide, we can start adding the local funding in then. And we see we've turned, map on the left is again just the system consequences, which remains the same. The map in the middle is after national funding is applied, and the map on the right is after that local funding is applied. So we can see the amounts that are that come in there. So we got 1.29 million general drainage charge and 2.17 million of IDB precept. If we incidentally, the IDB precept has remained unchanged since 2011. The RFCC has felt that it's not been appropriate to raise that charge on IDB since that time. Go on to the next slide, please, Joe. And this is just shows the adding in of that local levy. So we've had our local choices meeting in December, and it was agreed to put to the committee next week, the RFCC committee, a proposal to use £1.5 million of local levy funding towards maintenance. So you can see that that's again turned some of those systems into sort of fully funded systems. We raise around about £1.9 million of local levy annually. 25-26 is around about 1.9 million. Of that, I thought it would be worth noting that the amount raised through Lincolnshire County Council is 688,000. Part of the committee's role next week is to think about and agree whether they want to raise that at all. So that will be part of that committee's discussions next week. We go on to the final one, please, Jay. And this shows what this funding goes towards. It's maintaining or putting our assets at required condition. So our target for high consequence systems is for 92.5% of those assets to be at a target condition. Our actual at the moment is around about 91%. We're forecasting by the end of the financial year to be 93.5%. As a result of some of that prioritisation, we are struggling with some of our medium consequence systems, although the low consequence systems are higher. That's probably reflective of the number of assets that are in those systems. There's not an awful lot of assets within those low consequence systems. On the right, that refers to third-party assets, so assets that the Environment Agency doesn't maintain. So I'll leave it there. I'm happy to take any questions now or after the IDB presentation, but hopefully that's been useful to understand how we allocate funding across the geography of our area towards that more routine type maintenance activities. It doesn't include things like capital funding, so things like our large capital schemes, such as the refurbishment of like Grand Sluice, which is ongoing at the moment, and the Boston Barrier, for example. This is our year-on-year maintenance activities. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you for that, Morgan. I mean, obviously, for the more information getting out there, it's out there in the public. It shows how hard, the Environmental Agency do work, along with other organisations like the RFCC, the LJC. It's a constant battle to try and keep up with jiggling figures and, protecting people, properties. So, yeah, thank you for that, Morgan. We're now going to move to questions. Do any members wish to ask any questions? Councillor Chris Reeve.
Thank you. I noticed on one of the maps that there's still some areas that are totally unfunded. Although they're very small areas, I'm guessing, are those areas not particularly in need of any work at the moment, or are they areas where, if there was a problem, be less significant impact? What's the plan for those areas that's still in the darkest colour?
Yeah, those areas are mostly either there's no watercourse or assets in those areas. So I think you see some of those. It's peculiar for Lincolnshire, but some of the upland areas, if you like. So I think there's some of sort of around sort of the top of the wolds and things like that, where there's actually sort of no, we don't sort of cover those areas at all. You'll see some of the low consequence systems or the low risk systems are fully funded, and again that's because of that there's actually very, very few assets in those locations, and there might just be, if you like, some unavoidable costs in those areas. So there might be very, very small costs by comparison to a higher risk system that's not fully funded.
Thank you.
Those charts, I've seen them before in a previous agenda. Do they vary much?
So I think where you would have seen it before is in the local choices meeting for the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, where we were looking at how we can put, by adding the local funding, how it will change the the amount of funding available for each of those systems. So they would change on an annual basis depending on how much money we received from our national pot and how much money we're able to contribute from local resources. Obviously, the costs for those systems will go up on a yearly basis. So on a year-on-year basis, if the funding doesn't go up commensurately, then we're faced with further challenges in each of those systems. So yeah, they're likely to change in time. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Morgan. Councillor Carrington.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Just in the interest of transparency, it is in my overall declaration of interest, but I serve on the board of the Witham First IDB as a representative of North Cape, but I should imagine there are quite a few of us in the room who are in that boat. Morgan, thank you very much. That was a really, really interesting presentation. In fact, going to the Chairman's point, it'd be really helpful if that's possible, if through the offices we could have the slides, because I thought the story about the effect of the aggregate, if you will, of the national funding and the local funding, that is a really important issue, and it was really, really useful to see that in your presentation. But boy, isn't it frightening when we look at the national funding that basically we've got funding for 42% of identified need in an area of such great vulnerability as Lincolnshire. And I take your point about the IDB precept and the role the IDBs can play. But of course, the IDBs are being hammered, particularly as you're aware, Morgan, by not only maintenance needs, but energy costs and the hideous nature of the standing electricity charge, which is really punishing IDBs and, of course, the DCs, the district councils who support them. How we deal, a question for you. You were talking about risk-benefit analyses. How do you deal with sites which are rural sites requiring maintenance, but which have significant impacts on urban areas? I'm thinking, for example, and I think you were there when I dragged, rather against his will, your national chairman to Washington to look at the South Delf, which is a wonderful kind of watery forest. But it shouldn't be. It should be clear, and we talked about clearing that. That's a rural situation, but it has impacts, very powerful impacts on built-up areas, both upstream and down. How, in the cost-benefit analysis and the risk analysis, do you deal with that kind of situation?
Thank you. So in the sort of the national allocation, it uses quite high-level sort of metrics around that, and it mainly looks at what's within that system, if you like, within the floodplain that the assets are looking to reduce the risks of flooding towards. There is a certain amount that goes to infrastructure as part of that process. I understand what you're saying. You know that there's some assets which provide benefit to a wider area. So, for example, things like if you like, the Grand Sluice. If we didn't have that, flood risk would come all the way back to Lincoln in effect. You know, the river would be tidal further up, well, maybe not quite Lincoln, but a lot further up the Witham. So we can allocate a certain amount of benefit, if you like, from different parts of the catchment towards those assets which have a further impact further on. It's quite a complex sort of allocation process. If we're looking ahead to the future, we're hoping to move to a system that's perhaps a little bit more sophisticated than what we've got now. So we talked about assets at target condition. That's based on a visual asset inspection by our sort of trained river asset inspectors. They do a really good job. But we'll be moving to a system in the future which will look at more of the asset health. So any sort of indicators, we might do some more in-depth survey into those assets to understand what's going on beneath the surface. And that might give us different outcomes going forward. We'll also potentially be looking at assets over potentially a smaller geography. So we're looking at assets that work together to provide that benefit to the community. So in your neck of the woods, you know, there are several assets which operate to provide that benefit to to the land behind them. So we've got assets on the delphs and assets on the main river Witham and the South Delph, which all provide a benefit together with sluice gates and things, pointing doors and things, which provide that benefit to those areas there. So we'll be probably condensing our operating systems, if you like, going forward. But that's work for the future, and hopefully that will have a sort of a positive impact on being able to more accurately allocate funding to where it's needed.
Thank you very much, Chairman. If I could just add one final point, Morgan made reference to our contribution as the County Council to the local levy, I think 600k plus. Certainly, given the fact that this council has benefited by a significant amount of money coming in this year and in coming years from fairer funding, which was won by the previous administration, I would hope that we could look favourably should we be requested to increase our contribution, because there is little in this county more important than making sure that our residents are protected from flooding. Thank you.
Totally concur, Councillor Carrington. We know how vital it is, and every penny counts. So thank you for that. Councillor Reuben Robinson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. In terms of national funding for these projects, I presume DEFRA has stated that some of the funding has been shifted towards direct aid, grant and aid, to increase charge income in areas like water company inspection enforcement. How have your operations changed, and how have you adapted? And also, do you have any sort of idea of the impact of this, like percentage-wise, how much less money and how much you're going to have to find? Thank you.
So I think what you're referring to there is a different part of our business. So water company inspections doesn't impact flood risk management grant and aid part of the business. So if you want, as at a future meeting, I'm sure my colleagues in that part of the business would be happy to come along and talk about water company regulation, but that's a sort of separate part of the business, the one we deal with. So we deal with a flood defence grant and aid, which provides a certain amount for revenue activities, which is the more routine maintenance, and a certain amount over a period of years for capital funding. So this is the sort of the one-off schemes that demonstrably have an impact on reducing flood risk, such as like the Grand Sluice refurbishment, the Lower Witham flood resilience, improving embankments on the Lower Witham. We're also looking at in Sleaford updating our assets in there. That capital funding also pays for things like the beach renourishment on a year-on-year basis on the coast. So it's a separate part of the business and doesn't really impact on those type of things.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? No, thank you. Right, we shall now move to our next presenter, Carl Vines, who is presenting on behalf of the Internal Drainage Boards in Lincolnshire. Thank you, Carl.
Hello, good morning, everybody. As you know, there's several drainage boards within Lincolnshire. I work for the South Holland one down in the south of the county, but I've sought the views of other IDBs to make this update. So there's three issues I really wanted to talk about this morning. The first one we've already talked about is the reduction of EA maintenance budgets and the additional costs this is putting on IDBs and local funding. I just want to make it clear that this isn't a criticism of our local EA colleagues. We see this issue as being much higher up at government level with regards to the funding that they receive. But we are starting to see an impact upon asset condition, and the IDB systems which rely on these assets to discharge are now starting to suffer as well. If the main river hasn't been maintained and the IDB can no longer pump into it because it's already full, or if the main river overtops and damages IDB assets, it's becoming a more frequent and more of a problem. and the lack of funding is seen that conveyance of water is now being impeded. There's similar issues down in Somerset, the IDBs there. You know, that 75% of the main rivers in that area are no longer being maintained, and the IDBs there are struggling as a consequence, and we can see that we're probably only a few years behind them. Some of the links IDBs are now having to undertake EA maintenance work at the IDB's cost, which isn't sustainable. They're doing it this year, where they think that they need to do that for them to be able to carry on operating the IDB system, but you know, they cannot be expected to find that extra money long term. It's not a sustainable solution. With a reduction in national funding, it's putting more load on locally funded local authorities like IDBs. And that has a direct impact on the local levies and drainage charges that we make to the local people and the local councils. So it would seem that low-lying rural areas are being penalised in that respect, and there just isn't a facility at the moment for that local cost to be covered by IDBs, you know, long term. So really, we're looking to see what is the plan if the EA continues to be deprived of this funding on low consequence and medium consequence systems. There needs to be some sort of discussion at a high level, I would have thought, to see where this goes long term. And we're hoping that the Lincolnshire County Council will support IDBs in trying to bring that discussion to the front. So it's the Witham boards which I think are being most impacted by this reduction in funding, and I'm sure they would be very keen to provide more information and more detail behind this if LCC were willing to take it on and help the discussion reach a higher level. And there's also the issue of local resilience for future flooding events. EA are saying that there is a potential future reduced national response to such things. The bank breaches that occurred in 2023-2024, there were 13. Not all of those have yet been repaired, which is unprecedented. Normally, historically, they would have been addressed much sooner, and again, I assume that's down to lack of funding. And is that going to mean there's going to be more of a need for local responses in future flood events? Again, it's all a funding issue. So, yeah, that's the first point. I know we've already talked about it, but I think from the IDB point of view, it is a very important thing that needs to be looked at, because the current situation isn't sustainable as far as they're concerned with funding. The second point, again, has been touched on. It's the increase in electricity costs, particularly around standing charges, which the IDBs have been facing. Everybody's been facing it, but the IDBs in particular. In the last 5 years, standing charges have increased massively. 400% increases are not uncommon, and one board has seen an increase of 1,500% in standing charges. And that, again, is having an impact on what we have to charge local landowners and local councils with rate increases every year just to cover the increase in standing charge costs. And there is a risk of further future increases this year with the transmission element of the standing charge, which is only going to make the problem worse. So that's really just to make you aware of that issue that IDBs are facing, and that's one of the reasons why we've seen some big percentage increase in rate rises in the last few years. And the third thing, I wanted to end it on a more positive note. This is to do with DEFRA's IDB fund, which was launched by DEFRA following the Babette and Henk storms, and this allocated £91 million nationally to IDBs for flood recovery, resilience and innovation projects in 24-25 and 25-26. And Links IDBs have been at the forefront of claiming and spending that recovery money in the county. So of the 91 million national fund, these are the figures for 4 Lincolnshire IDBs. Of the £91 million national fund, 28 million has been utilised by 4 of the Lincolnshire IDBs alone. So that's £28 million over 64 schemes that have been carried out. And these projects have got to be finished by the 31st of March this year. which has put a massive pressure on not only staff but also the suppliers and contractors to do this work. But it's been a really useful fund for us to be able to tap into. But it's allowed work to be carried out on such things that wouldn't normally attract granting aid. So it's been a very useful fund for us, and it will be good to get such things again, but I doubt it will happen. But I think that's a really positive thing that we've been able to tap in and use that amount of money in the last couple of years. So that's it from me. Any questions, please?
Thank you, Carl. I've got to absolutely agree with you. I think with the environmental agency, the IDBs and the county council, together we need to be requesting more funding for Lincolnshire. It's quite clear, you know, from the presentations that you give, that there just isn't enough funding to keep up with protecting the people of Lincolnshire. So it's definitely something we need to have future conversations about, that's for sure. Do we have any conversations, any questions for Carl, please?
I'd like to ask if there's any potential long-term solution to the funding of drainage boards in the future. And obviously, we need that at the moment. The government kind of hand out some more money each time, nowhere near enough. But for years, we've been trying to get a fundamental review of how IDBs are funded. Is there any good news in sight? And I don't know if I'd need to do the same as Councillor Carrington. I'm a member of the Deepings and Welland Internal Drainage Board.
I don't think there's anything in sight. I think there is the need for more discussion about that. If at the moment we've got national funding being pulled, which is putting pressure on local funding, which can't be increased without massive percentage increases on those that are already paying. So if we can't fix that issue, if we can't make more national funding available, then the model for local fundraising has got to be changed, hasn't it? So there is the possibility of demaining of watercourses, IDBs extending areas to taking full catchments to bring in more people to share the cost. But you know, none of these things are happening yet, and we're in a situation where the national funding has been pulled before other alternatives can be put into place. So yeah, there's a lot of discussions to be had, I think.
If you don't mind, Chair, and it mirrors what the Environment Agency have said, in that there just isn't enough money, and the situation isn't going to get any better anytime soon. If the Environment Agency part of the puzzle can't find 50% of the necessary funding, and the IDBs are under the cosh, not least because of the energy costs, then it's not a pretty picture, really, is it?
Not at all, no, I totally agree. Councillor Baxter. Carl, could you just be vigilant of your microphone when you're not using it, please? Thank you. Morgan, please.
Yeah, there is actually the DEFRA have commissioned an independent review into sort of IDB funding. I believe, just looking at this, it's due, expected to conclude in the summer of 2026. So the issues are the issues, as we've discussed, are sort of well documented. You know, the follow-on impacts on local councils and things like that. That work is undergoing at the minute. I know there's different sort of discussions and consultation and things like that out at the moment. That's ongoing. We'll have to see what some of the outcomes of that are in due course. I suppose the other thing which we mentioned previously are projects like the FENS 2100, which is across all risk management authorities that cover sort of the Fenland areas, and that's really looking over the next sort of 15, 20 years, looking at what the immediate needs are across all risk management authorities in terms of asset management are concerned, and then looking at the business case, you know, for the next sort of 50 odd years after that. So again, some of that is going to be sort of coming to fruition over the next year or so. So I think was Amy, who came previously, is leading that. So we'll see hopefully some of those outcomes. Some of the sort of the catchment sort of baseline assessments have been done for that. So I'm sure I can provide a link to that in due course as well. So it's useful. So we've got the Witham as a baseline catchment. We've got the steeping, and then the sort of the Welland and Neen as well as some of the other sort of fens catchments. So again, that's sort of really setting the scene. What the asset requirements are over the sort of the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Do we have any other questions for Carl? Councillor Carrington?
Yeah, I just wanted to endorse what you said, Chairman, and Councillor Baxter said about funding. We have got to look at this. I know, for example, that the District Councils Network has made representations to ministers as part of the review that Morgan's talking about. And indeed, I attended a meeting with IDB reps and representatives of the agency with Emma Hardy a few months ago, the Floods Minister, and that point was made to her. And she's a very, very able, very clued in, very switched on minister indeed. The question is we have to find mechanisms to unlock that money. My personal preference would be that the package should include what are known as highlands paying for water, because at the moment, where the water ends up is where the service gets paid for. But water still responds to gravity, to the best of my knowledge. So basically, we're having a small proportion of the county shoulder the cost for water which is falling all over the county. And we have to look at modern methods of making sure we have enough local funding, in addition to the national funding through the agency, which can be locally directed, because we're the best people to understand need. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions for Carl? Comments? No. Right, well, thank you for that. We do have Chris Miller and Matthew Harrison available for any additional questions to the conversation. Do we have any questions for Councillor Baxter?
Thank you. More of a comment. I just wanted to feedback. I wanted to feed back to Anglian Water, but they're not here. But in their absence, I want to say that the relationship between the flood risk coordinators at South Kesteven and Anglian Water has got a lot better. And it's not just flood, it's also outages. We've had, I think in the last year, at least 4 different supply outages of water around the district. I don't know what's happening in other districts, but it's gone from us not knowing about it at all until the phones start ringing to having some idea of where it is, what the cause is, so that we can respond accordingly with water or portaloos or whatever. I mean, there's another issue about the increasing number of outages, and it might suggest similar to other authorities, an ageing infrastructure, but the jury's out on that one at the moment. But I did want to put on record my thanks for the improved communication with Anglian Water.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Anybody else wish to ask any questions for Matthew Harrison or Chris Miller? No? Comments? Thank you. Right. As we've now finished the questions and comments, we'll now move to recording the conclusions. I'd like to propose that the presenters are thanked for attending the committee and sharing information with the flood risk management activities, and that the committee satisfaction be recorded in the progress made by the local flood risk management authorities in improving development flood resilience, and that the next report of the flood risk partners be received on the 27th of March. Item 6, budget proposals. During January, each scrutiny committee is considering the executive's budget proposals for the areas under each committee remit. The report for this committee is circulated separately on the 12th of January 2026 and will be presented by Pam Clipson, Head of Financial Services. We also have senior officers of the services areas present to provide questions on service call. Also available today, we have Nicole Hilton, Assistant Director of Communities, Chris Yorkson, Head of Waste, and Chris Miller, Head of Environment. Now pass you over to Pam, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. So the executive met on the 6th of January and published the full budget proposals for the period 1st of April 2026 to the 31st of March 2027. A link to that document is included on the last page of the report contained within your packs for today. The report for today forms part of the budget consultation process. In February 2025, the Council approved plans for revenue spending to support delivery of the then Council plan, the strategic objectives and the legal duties that were to be adhered to during 25-26, and that was the starting point for the budget proposals that you have in front of you today. Full Council is responsible for the adoption of the budget, and that is scheduled to take place at the meeting to be held on the 20th of February. The outcome of scrutiny deliberations, including today, on the initial proposals will feed into that meeting. The report in front of you today includes the updated revenue budget proposals and updated capital proposals for the environment services. Any impact of funding reform is included within the paper. The process that we have followed started in the summer of last year and has gone through all of our income and expenditure budgets held across the environment services, and the key headlines that are proposed to change from the budget for 25-6 into 26-7 are contained within your report. At that point, I will hand across to Nicole to pick up specifically the service changes, and we'll take questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good morning, committee. So as Pam's identified, there are some key headlines that I'll just bring to your attention. The first one that fits within the Environment Service, which is the 119,000, which is a financial contribution to the ongoing More Woods and More Hedges campaign. This is a partnership, an incredibly successful partnership that's been working with Woodland and Trust, of which we've extended to 2028. So this was part of our commitment to plant 500,000 trees that my executive director has as a personal responsibility to deliver as part of his objective. So it's a good one that we continue to 2028. The other one of notable change is a £60,000 contract inflation for highways term maintenance contract for the public rights of way work, and also the flood and coastal erosion risk management levy, which is a contribution we make to the Environment Agency, which aids flood protection work. Moving on to waste services, which perhaps for this scrutiny is the most changeable, most variable and most volatile service area. Members will be aware that Lincolnshire County Council has a 25-year partnership with FCC to run our energy from waste facility that's located in North Hykeham. The energy from waste facility processes our residual waste, which is essentially what used to be called black bin waste, so everything that can't be removed and recycled, repurposed or used in a different way. The costs are driven very much by the volume of waste that's presented by our households in their bins that are collected by the districts and then go to our waste transfer stations. So the energy from waste facility has a varied capacity depending on the time of year, depending on the seasons of whether people have done lots of gardening, whether it's Christmas and people are throwing away a lot of food waste, and what the maintenance programme for that EFW is as well. As part of the contract, we do have the facility does produce electricity, and which is exported to the national grid, and we have a partnership arrangement where that generated income is shared between FCC and the council. In 2026-27, the budget included a £740,000 increase due to contractual inflation affecting disposal, operation and haulage. DEFRA and PAC UK also confirmed that the extended producer responsibility, known as EPR grant, will reduce by 1.62 million. A reduction of 2.92 million has also been included related to the EFW third-party income. That's the electricity that we sell that I referred to momentarily ago. This is known as the excess profit EPS income. In 2024-2025, we received 5.3 million from the EFW, but the forecast for 25-26 is reduced to 2.3 million. And this variance is mainly due to the reduction in wholesale global energy prices. And I think the one thing to remember there, this is wholesale energy prices. This is not domestic energy prices. And selling to the grid is very different from you buying from the grid. So whilst you might be seeing your energy prices significantly increasing, that's because you're purchasing, you're not selling. So they're very different market commodities. The council has developed plans also which sees food waste diverted away from incineration towards anaerobic digestion, or commonly known as an AD plant. Disposal through AD is significantly cheaper than incineration, so it's significantly cheaper than it going through our EFW. However, the change to the 25-26 budget setting process assumed that disposal through anaerobic digestion treatment would generate an additional income. Members will recall that my colleague Chris Miller presented a paper, Chris Yorston, apologies, presented a paper about our plans for anaerobic digestion. You will recall that we secured a market contract in the very, very early days before local authorities got their plans together, which was a very favourable contract. However, as the market has been saturated, as other local authorities have now come online, available capacity is reduced, and we are now seeing a move away from a rebate to a cost. So the 2026-27 budget includes a 1.67 million cost reduction due to the move to AD. However, this is reduced by 374,000 because of the market saturation referred to. This generates a net benefit from the move to AD for food waste, though, of 1.29 million overall for 2026-27, with further savings forecast for 27-28 as this food waste processing is rolled out across Lincolnshire. There is a £284,000 additional cost resulting from the need to continue to divert residual waste from the EFW. Diversion costs are incurred when the main waste plant exceeds capacity or in the event of a planned or unplanned shutdown. So a planned shutdown would be for annual maintenance. An unplanned shutdown is usually when something has broken within the facility. The original budget allocation for diversions in 2026-27 was just over £1 million. This was based on all districts removing food waste from the residual waste. However, 3 district councils are now planning a later start to the food waste collection than was previously indicated, and that means that an estimated 10,000 tonnes will remain going through the waste stream to the FW. There's a £460,000 increased income in haulage costs, savings from continued rollout of separate paper and card collections, and 150 million operating costs of the creation of the Greater Lincolnshire Waste Transfer Station, which is required as a disposal point for the City of Lincoln in order to meet theirs and their statutory requirements, theirs and our statutory requirements on separated food waste. There's a £420 million procurement cost also included in the processing. Moving on to planning, following a comprehensive review of spend across the council, all services, including planning, have identified opportunities to deliver cost savings through service operations efficiencies, and more importantly for planning services, increased income. So in 2026-27, £440,000 relates to an increase to the fees for planning applications and increase to the charge-out rate for planning and performance agreements. So moving on away from revenue onto capital, there is one main one to bring to your attention, which we have already covered, which is the budget proposal to repurpose the £2 million that's put aside for the creation of a new HWRC in Skegness. And the decision, or the proposals, my apologies, is to fund South Holland twin stream recycling and HWRC's improvements across the county. It's therefore proposed that the council utilises this funding for multiple other waste projects that will have a significantly wider impact on the waste management and cost reduction. My colleague Chris Yorston can give any further details on that, but I think the one thing to note is the fact that one of the major reasons why the HWRC Skegness project has been delayed is due to land availability and also the changes to the waste legislation. The final point to note is the repurposing proposal of this money means that the revised programme can proceed without the need to increase any further borrowing. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Nicole. Do we have any questions for any members? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. When people say, I don't mean to be rude, it usually is followed by being quite rude. I'm really not intending to be rude, but this report is incomprehensible. If you look at, for example, paragraph 1.13, I mean, I challenge anyone to read that first and understand it first time. The sentences are way too long. I mean, what is the last word in that paragraph? A funding quantum. Well, I mean, I thought that was physics quantum. I don't get it. But moving on to the proposals or the changes in expenditure, waste services. We've got all these different paragraphs. I mean, could we not have a table to sum all this up? Because you've really got to dig down into what's in those paragraphs in order to understand what we're being told. I will come on to what we're being told in a minute, but the only table we have got, I can't make sense of, is at paragraph 2.3, and on the environment, it's for 4.1 million plus for 177,000 comes to that total in the final column. But on the waste, we've got down as income and savings a cost figure. So 2.2 million pounds income and savings is down as a cost to the authority. I don't understand how that works mathematically. If it's income and savings, it should be a minus figure, surely. Then we get on to the capital paragraph, which is paragraph 3, capital programme. The only figure in there is for £2 million for the Household Waste Recycling Centre Skegness scheme, and that's a very, very round £2 million. So are there no other actual numbers attached to our capital schemes? If so, where are they? This is supposed to be the result of a fundamental review of council finances, and yet in paragraph 2.3 in the table we see that development management is an identical figure. After a fundamental review, the likely cost is exactly the same to the last pound as it was last year. I find that surprising, to say the least. In planning, we see savings of £444,000, but I don't quite understand where they are from. We're saying that we're going to raise almost £500,000 by, in paragraph 2.17, increases to the fees and increases to the charge-out rates. That's something like a 40%, no, maybe less than that, 20% increase in income, or increase in income due to just changing the fees and rolling out the charges. I want to understand it. On the waste services, I have an issue with the energy from waste plant. I mean, it should be called an electricity from waste plant because it generates electricity and heat, but the heat is just thrown out of the window or thrown out of the chimney. It is designed to heat something nearby, but there's nothing nearby for it to heat. So consequently, it heats the atmosphere instead. And don't get me started on the CO2. How many years are we into the 25-year partnership? Are we near the end or are we near the beginning? On the paragraph 2.10 about the supply contracts, yes, we know that selling to the grid is not as profitable or is different price to buying from the grid. Have we investigated a power purchase agreement so that we could virtually buy our own energy from our own energy generating plant? There's mention in 2.11 about a cost reduction. How much is this cost reduction? And I see that later on we're moving from a rebate to a cost. It's just, it's unclear. There's not enough detail. Some of the numbers are missing and some of the numbers I don't trust. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. The whole point of this committee is to scrutinise it, and obviously you've picked up a few points there that these points that you've picked up, are they questions you'd like answering today, or are these questions that you would like noting and answering in the future?
If there are any answers to the particular questions about, for example, the power purchase
Yeah, I
agreement.
was just about to say, Councillor Baxter, there's quite a few in there, and I don't know whether the officers picked them all up in one hit or whether you want to break it down.
Well,
but obviously
at least I should leave this meeting understanding the table that says that that income and savings is going to cost us £2.2 million.
Right, thank you. I think Pam's happy to answer hopefully some or, if not all, those.
I'll pick up the technicals and then I'll pass over to some of the services around the electricity, energy, heat style conversation. So in terms of paragraph 1.13 about the funding quantum, nationally there has been a material shift in how local authorities are funded, which we've termed fairer funding. There are the fairer funding will show income changes slightly differently in each of the years, so we don't actually get the full outcome until 2028-29. All that paragraph is saying is that could still shift between the provisional settlement that was published in December and the final one in February, but overall, the whole quantum, overall, the level of funding that LCC receives, that's what we mean, that's what that means, the total funding that LCC receives over the life of the medium-term financial plan is not expected to change, but how it feeds in 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29, etc., may shift between provisional settlement in December and final when it's published by the government. That's all that means. That's what we mean by quantum. Overall allocation to Lincolnshire County Council in the life of the budget. In terms of table 2.3, all that does is summarise the budget that we've got in 25-26 to the proposal in 26-27. The reason that the waste income figure is a positive 2.27 and therefore a pressure relates to the paragraph in 2.1, which Nicole articulated. When we set the budget in February 2025, there was an assumption that we would bring in 5.3 million of income from the energy from waste plant. We are not bringing that level of income in. We're bringing in less by the figures contained in 2.10. So the reason it's a positive and not a negative is because we're having to reduce the expected income coming into LCC, not increase it. That's why it's a positive figure, because we are dampening, that income is a reduction. We still get 2.3 million in, but we were forecasting 5.3.
So surely we budgeted for an income.
We budgeted for income of 5.3 million. We're not receiving 5.3, we're receiving 2 point, and that's why it's gone down. If it was a negative figure, your income would go up. Yeah, so because of the articulation in 210, the income is going down, therefore that's a pressure to the council, which is why you can't show that as a negative. If our income was going up, it would show as a negative figure, as a minus, but it isn't. So it is confusing, I understand that, but we have to show that it is actually a deterioration in our income level and not a positive. So I think that was that section. I'm just wondering if there's any other, in terms of 2.11, when you were talking about AD, anaerobic digestion. We have been clear on what the savings are on the anaerobic digestion. Again, we assumed that we would be within the rebate model at the 1.6 million of income coming in. Because of that market saturation that Nicole was referencing, we've seen an adverse to that income expectation of 374 million. So we have actually got a budget now expectation of 1.2. So we are still generating income from it, but not as much as we assumed when we set the medium-term financial plan in February 25-26. So all we're doing now is showing those material changes between what our assumptions were that have now been refreshed during the summer, and those key bits are articulated within each paragraph. Happy to take any questions on the technicals that I may have missed. Otherwise, happy if any of, I think Chris wants to pick up some of the elements of the service. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Yeah, I can pick up on a couple of the waste technical questions. So the energy from waste, it does produce heat, and it's got the opportunity to have a heat district network. However, we haven't found a target market for that. That's something we're still actively looking at. When you do produce the heat, though, then that reduces the electricity. So there is an offset to that. You can't have both on full. You have to then, there's a ratio to that. The partnership, we're just over halfway through, so we're about 13 years through the 25-year partnership. And on the last one, I didn't catch your point on 2.11, but I don't know if you just answered that one, Pam.
It was regards to the power purchase agreement. The way in which the contract is set up, or was set up with FCC, is complex and wouldn't allow for us to be able to do that within the current contract because of that profit share agreement that we have with them. And I believe, I think the only other one you asked for or made comment on, Councillor Baxter, was regard to the planning fees and the ambitious income target that we've put there. That is primarily as a result of the extraordinarily high number of NSIP, the nationally significant infrastructure projects across Lincolnshire. So that's to do with developer advice that we build into the contract. So in order, because we're a consultee, my colleague Alison can provide any more technical detail, but we are in an unusual position in Lincolnshire because of that, which is why we can be, we can put in confidently that level of income generation.
Thank you, Nicole. Oh, Councillor Bailey-Robinson.
Thank you. I think Councillor Baxter sort of took my questions, but I just wanted to sort of see a bit more explanation with the North Hykeham EFW plant's output. So it's, am I correct in saying, so it's not, it's part of a contract that we currently have of profit sharing? Is that what that was? Yeah. So is that something that we're looking at in the future at the end of that contract? So looking at sort of having that part of the contract once that ends?
So the contract is continually under review and amendments by both parties in order for us to reach the optimum level as the lifestyle of waste disposal changes, and as the government introduces different diversionary schemes and different waste and separated contracts. So we're continually looking at that, and it's continually being reviewed. With regards to what happens once the 25-year contract is up, that will be certainly something that the team will start to focus on in the next kind of 5 years, not least because that plant is worked very hard. It has a certain lifespan, so we will need to consider what the future one looks like. I do have to say, though, the partnership that we've had with FCC has been very successful. So the running of that plant is extremely high in comparison perhaps to some of our colleagues in other local authorities who've maybe entered into relationships that haven't been so productive.
So there's that in the next, so did you say 5 years is the end of the?
I think we're in year 8 of a 25-year relationship. So I think within the next 5 years, what we'll be looking at as an organisation is what waste disposal facilities we will need going forward. One of those will include the asset of the EFW.
Okay, thank you. Can I pop another question? Yeah, just given the £1.62 million reduction in grant funding from the government due to the removal of the recycling credits and the fact that the 3 district councils have already delayed their food waste recycling start dates, what steps can we do to ensure that districts remain financially motivated to prioritise recycling over residual waste collection?
Okay, I'll let my colleague Chris Yorston take this one because he sits on the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership, which is where all the districts come together, including the local ourselves as the local disposal authority, and he can talk about the influence and persuasion you can bring there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so as part of the extended producer responsibility and the funding that we get, but also the district councils get, it's really important to be an effective and efficient service. That's sort of the metrics they're using. So that incentivises them that they need to recycle as much as they possibly can, and of which food waste is going to be part of that. And the reason why the phasing has been split, we've got 4 district councils going in the April time, and then the rest are going to be sort of October, November, is because of the delays it's taken to get the actual vehicles, because we've got so many councils that are all of a sudden in the market to buy a food waste vehicle. If you were lucky enough to get in there quite quickly, you had quite a short lead-in time, but unfortunately some of the councils, the decision-making process took a little bit longer, and then they're at the back of the queue. So that is the reason, the main reason why they're slightly delayed, is it's going to take a bit more time to get the vehicles. But as soon as we get the vehicles as a partnership, we're coordinated and we want to get that service implemented. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to agree with Councillor Baxter on this. I mean, the first thing I said to my colleague when I came in this morning was, did you understand the budget report? Because to me, it's extremely unclear and very vague. I was hoping to understand in much more detail where savings and efficiencies were coming from, and get a breakdown really of the detail. And we just don't have it. I found myself sitting there with the main budget report, which the executive had, and this, and trying to compare figures and trying to work out where, for instance, it says planning services, operational efficiencies and increased income. So I hunted for and found the increased income, the £60,000 increase for planning application fees, £100,000 increase for planning performance agreement. But that's not in our report as such, that's in the other budget report. And it really is a case of sort of trying to juggle this around to actually understand where the so-called efficiencies and savings are coming from. There's been a big deal made about sort of shaking the council up and trying to find all these efficiencies, and obviously the Doge thing and etc. from political side of things. But where we are at the moment is we're told there's all these savings, but this is as clear as mud. I've really struggled to try and understand exactly whether the budget is increased, whether it's stayed the same, and as I say, in my mind, this report's terrible. I've read through lots of reports for many years. I've been doing this kind of thing now, and this is actually one of the worst occasions where I've sat there and thought, I'm not getting the detail from this I need. I mean, I can't support this, or in any way, shape, or form. I found it quite poor.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Would you like to go in on that, Pam? Nicole?
No, I think we'll take that away. The line-by-line detail is in the full budget that was published on the 6th of January. Line-by-line savings with the detail are in Appendix B. All this report is designed to do is pull out those key headlines, but we will take that away and feedback back for when we do it next year. Also happy to take any comments. We try not to reproduce the full budget that's produced on the January, but happy to take any, or I will take the feedback away, and we'll think about how we do it differently next year.
Thank you, Pam. I think sometimes people do get bewildered with too much information. Sometimes a simple, straightforward budget would be a lot easier to understand.
Yeah, well, we tried to make these a bit simpler, but obviously it's gone a bit too high level. But we'll take that away. We'll take that feedback away.
I think putting the nitty-gritties separate to a straightforward sometimes works better.
Chair, it's not about being at a high level. I mean, the information within it is understandable if you can penetrate the language. More use of bullet points, more use of tables, and more plain number. I mean, I'm not going to repeat what's been said.
Councillor Reid.
In terms of the energy from waste facility, before my time, I presume Lincolnshire County Council contributed a significant amount to the construction of that facility. And although I fully appreciate it's a forever changing environment and playing field and costs and everything and legislation, is there a point at which Lincolnshire County Council will get their money back? Is it an investment? Is it just the lesser of so many evils that we have to pay out, and long term over the period of the contract we will lose money, or will we break even on what we put into the facility in the first place? What sort of figures are we looking at in that sort of area? Because I don't know, I'm thinking long term obviously, but at some point we're going to have to review whether we burn waste for electricity, whether we concentrate on going back to landfill. I don't know. I'm just thinking, how much is it going to cost compared to what we put in terms of what we're getting back? But we don't know where the energy prices are going to be and that sort of things, as I say. So I fully appreciate that. But just wondering, sort of in a nutshell, where we stand at the moment. Thank you.
I think it's a really interesting question, really good question. It is a wholly owned LCC asset, so it predates me and it predates my colleague Chris Yorston, who can come in with the detail. I think one of the things to consider is that if we weren't putting waste through our own facility, we would have to be paying somebody else to dispose of it, which would likely be a much higher cost and a much higher rate. But I'm going to defer to my colleague Chris Yorston, because he is responsible for managing waste disposal, so he's got a lot more detail there.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. So yeah, the energy from waste is the best available technology that we have for dealing with our residual waste. But the changing legislation it's going to be under review over the next few years. We've got the emissions trading scheme coming in and looking at our carbon emissions. So at the moment, it's the most cost-effective way to deal with our residual waste. When the facility was developed back in about 2010, we was landfilling the majority of our waste. The government at the time then introduced landfill tax, which made that really, really expensive. So the business case was that to construct an energy from waste facility at a significant cost was still going to be cheaper over that 25 years than it would be to landfill. And obviously there's lots of associated environmental impacts with landfill as well. So producing the energy from waste facility does save the authority, and I think off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember back to those days, it's about £30 to £40 million over the lifetime. So yeah, it was a significant investment, but there was there's a savings to be made there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carrington.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I will almost confine myself to the nitty-gritty, but we have talked about the nature of the report, and I would support colleagues who've said there is always a balance in these things between how much detail you put in and how much you don't. But I do find this one really quite challenging to get through, and I do take the point, when we sit there, all of us in this room, I'm sure, with this document and then other documents, but this, Chairman, is the document that we're being asked to sign off on in our meeting this morning. So in itself, it has to have sufficient detail to be clear. And I think if there are areas where officers wish to refer us to other documents relating to the broader council budget, it would be very helpful to have consistently references to those so that we know what is in their minds, because this, I think, goes too far, but I think that point has been taken by officers. A few points of nitty-gritty, Chairman, if I can raise. Firstly, I'm sure that our residents on the East Coast, and particularly Skegness, will be very disappointed about the news about the household waste recycling plant. I hope that the point that was made by Nicole, I think, about it being a land issue, that means that this is a temporary thing, and I'd seek some reassurance on that. If the money is to be redistributed, as we've been told, could we please have some more detail on how it is going to be redistributed, presumably through the existing household waste recycling plants? Are we looking, for example, at increasing opening days, which is something many residents want? Are we looking at physical changes? I mean, if we go to Great Northern Terrace, the recycling centre closest to this building, there are considerable constraints physically on site and huge queues because it at the moment isn't open every day of the week. So that would be helpful to understand. There's a reference in the document to the new capital strategy, which the February Executive Board will look at. good reference, but I very much hope that that will not, and I seek again reassurance that that won't undermine what is in here for the coming year, because that would be challenging. Point has already been made about paragraph 2.17, completely incomprehensible. But can I finish with trees? I think there was mention at the beginning of our commitment to planting 500,000 trees, and the personal responsibility of Mr. Gutherson, who's back. I mean, he's looking really fit on it, so it's clearly doing very well. I thought, and forgive me if I'm wrong, I thought that under the previous administration we were planning 600,000 trees. I wondered whether the project had been pruned or any trees had been chopped. Thank you, Chairman.
We do have a number of hands up to my right willing to answer this. So I think, Chris Miller, please.
The commitment was actually 750,000 trees.
And thank you for recognising how good I am on the back of doing all that work, Councillor Carrington.
Do we have any other comments to Councillor Carrington's?
I think there's just the assurance, Councillor Carrington, that we will provide the detail on the proposed repurposing of the HWRC money. Just to reiterate, the intention is that it will benefit all residents of Lincolnshire as opposed to it being in one facility, but we will provide that detail.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Pam.
It's just to come back on the comment around the capital strategy. So no, it won't undermine anything that's in any of the budgets. It's being drafted in accordance with the proposals that are out there. So again, it will just tweak any feedback that comes will then be built in, but it will not undermine the proposals. And then as Nicole says, it will just show how those decisions then, if the proposal to put that 2 million aside will then get spent, will come back through this committee to give you all of the detail around what that would then do in its own right as a paper.
Thank you again. Councillor Woods.
Thank you. A lot of what I wanted to say has been, covered and brought up as well. So on 2.11, what with the implementation of anaerobic digestion, what is the maximum level of savings to the waste budget? Have you got a timeline for that? Does the forecast stretch any further than 27, 28? When will we achieve that maximum level of savings? And sorry, my second question, 2.17's been covered a couple of times or mentioned a couple of times. I don't know whether this has been addressed. I might have missed it. When it says an increase to the charge-out rate for planning and performance agreements, what does that mean in practice? And that's it.
I'll pick up on the food waste. So it's dependent on when the districts go out, but as I said before, we've got 4 of the districts that are going to be going from April. So the savings that are detailed there, the 1.29, we'll get in that the next financial year that's coming up. And then we've detailed that in 27-28 we'll then realise the rest of the savings. So there's about a further £1.5 million to be saved from the introduction of food waste. So overall we're looking about a £2.8 million saving from the introduction of food waste, because it is cheaper to send food waste to anaerobic digestion than to go through our energy from waste facility.
So will they stretch any further, those savings, than what you've listed, or is that?
Well, we're projecting it on 30,000 tonnes. So that's sort of that's the middle of the window that we've sort of analysed, and we've looked at so RAP. They provide different scenarios of good participation versus poor participation. So we've gone somewhere down the middle. We're hopeful. We've got a really good coordinated comms and communications campaign that we can try and maximise that as much as possible. So if we do see good participation, we'll see less waste going through the energy from waste facility, which create further savings, and we'll see more waste going through the anaerobic digestion facility. So it is really key on getting that behavioural change of our residents to understand the benefits, not just for the cost and the savings that we'll realise at the county council, and but also the environmental impacts, because food waste is classed as recycling, and we are forecasting it's going to boost our recycling rates by about 7 to 8%. And if we get even better participation, that could go even higher.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments or questions regarding the budget proposals?
I can take the question about the planning performance agreements.
Sorry, say again, Alice.
Oh, I can take the question about planning performance agreements, the planning fees issue.
Do we have any? Oh, okay.
It was this,
I'm right, so yeah. Sorry, Alice.
basically, you're all aware of the number of NSIPs we have in the county. We have planning performance agreements with the developers so that they cover the costs of the county council of us providing advice and participating in their development of the project. And we have a number of levels of agreement throughout the progress of an NSIP, from pre-application through to the examination period and then post-decision for the discharge of requirements. And what we've done is the original hourly rate that we were charging out was quite old, so what we've done is increase that officer hourly rate recharge to the developers. So that's what has accounted for the increase in cost, plus obviously the increase in the number of NSIPs coming forwards.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, did you have one? No. Do you have any other questions? No. Thank you. Right, as we've now finished questions, we'll now move to recording the conclusions. I move that the summary of the committee's comments on the budget proposals be passed to the Executive for consideration on the 3rd of February 2026. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Chris Reeve. Now move to the votes. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you, that's agreed. Item 7, updates to the Minerals and Waste Plan. This report is found on pages 13 to 68 of the agenda pack. This is a report on the Minerals and Waste Local Plan, which the Council is required to prepare in line with the detailed legal process. The report will be presented by Neil McBride, who is, and Alison Richards, yeah. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you, Chair. The report in front of committee today is with regard to the Minerals and Waste Development Scheme and the Statement of Community Involvement, which are two documents required to support the development of the Minerals and Waste Local Plan. As a county council, we have a statutory responsibility to plan for the future mineral supply and waste management within Lincolnshire via a Minerals and Waste Local Plan. We're currently progressing the emerging Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste Local Plan, which will plan for minerals and waste up to 2042. There are two statutory documents we must produce which don't form part of the local plan itself but support its production, and those are namely a Minerals and Waste Development Scheme, which essentially provides the timetable for the stages of the local plan production, including when we will be formally consulting, and the Statement of Community Involvement, which provides information on how we will consult at defined stages in the development of the local plan and also on planning applications. The Minerals and Waste Development Scheme is expected to be reviewed and updated at least annually, but may need updating more frequently if there are significant changes to the timescales of the plans being prepared. In line with legislation, a review of the current Minerals and Waste Local Plan was undertaken in 2021, which concluded that the Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste Plan should be updated in full and a minerals and waste development scheme was produced to guide that process. At its meeting on the 19th of February 2021, full council authorised the updating of the whole plan and a new Lincolnshire minerals and waste development scheme, setting out the programme of work involved in updating the plan. Excuse me. An indicative timetable was also approved as part of the preferred options consultation in the summer of 2024. As since the previous issues and options consultation in 2022, we were unable to follow the timetable due to loss of key officers. Since the preferred approach consultation in 2024, there again has been some slippage in the production of the plan due to the high response rate to the consultation, the introduction of new planning requirements which we needed to consider, and the team capacity. The Minerals and Waste Development Scheme before you has therefore been updated to reflect the revised timetable through to adoption in late 2027. It must be highlighted, though, that once the plan is submitted for examination to the Secretary of State, the timetable is no longer in the hands of the Council. The Levelling Up and Regeneration Act in 2023 has introduced a new plan-making system in England, with councils being required to prepare and adopt local plans within a 30-month time frame. Draft guidance on this new system was produced late last November, alongside a written ministerial statement which provided information that the secondary legislation will be published in early 2026. Due to the move from one system to another, there is a transitional period in which current local plans can still progress under the existing legislation and policy, but these must be submitted by the 31st of December 2026. Due to the stage the emerging Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste Plan has reached and the level of work which has been undertaken to reach this point, it is intended to submit the plan under the current system by the end of this year. With regard to the Statement of Community Involvement, the basic consultation requirements are set out in regulations, and we will comply with these. The document also lists additional consultation options which we could deliver should we have the capacity. The Statement of Community Involvement also provides information on how we will consult on planning applications. The Statement of Community Involvement is required by legislation to be reviewed every 5 years. The previous Statement of Community Involvement was adopted in 2019. Therefore, this document has been reviewed and now updated to reflect both statutory requirements and the potential options for consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Do we have any questions or comments regarding the waste? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I don't particularly want to go first, but yeah, I understand what's being presented, and I understand that you've got a difficult a difficult message to send. I understand that the rules are changing so that we have to move at what seems like a breakneck speed now to get the thing done by the end of the year. I understand that in 2021, so that's 5 years ago, the council decided, well, this is really something we ought to get on with. And now 5 years later, we're still saying, well, now we really do need to get on with this. I understand that there was a high level of responses in 2024 because I was copied into an awful lot of them, a very high proportion related to a potential site in West Deeping, a very unpopular site in West Deeping and beyond, but there are other sites in my neck of the woods which are also unpopular. I mean, no quarry site is going to be met with a round of applause and a public celebration, but these sites are particularly bad in terms of transport, worries about emissions, worries about highway safety and so on, and that prompt and obviously deterioration of the countryside. I understand that this report doesn't have anything in about the detail, but all those people, I think it was thousands of people that completed the consultation getting on for 2 years ago have had not a peep about the impact of what they have said. If you were able to say, well, actually, Councillor Baxter, we've decided to leave out the West Deeping site, then I'd jump for joy and probably leave this alone. But so that detail isn't going to appear until the last minute before we go to the section 19. And I find that incredibly frustrating as a resident of Lincolnshire and as an elected representative of the communities that are most affected. So I understand it. I think if there's a question particularly, it will be, if we don't hit the deadline, what's plan B?
Plan B would be that we fall into the new plan-making system, at which point we have to, excuse me, make sure that we progress the plan under the new system, and the new regulations will require that that plan is developed wholly within that new system, and that it includes a prescribed sequence of consultations and gateway checks that we have to follow. So that would mean that adoption wouldn't be until late 2029 if you're following the 30-month time frame.
So it would be a complete restart, return to go, do not collect £200.
It's a different system. We could bring forward, use some of the evidence base that we have collected and commissioned, but yes, we have to start the actual process again.
If I may, Chair, if we do that, what does that mean? In a district council term, that would mean that we didn't have an available land supply or whatever for housing. In terms of minerals and waste extraction, if speculative applications come along during that period up to 2029, as they are at the moment, does it make it easier, harder, or no different to opposing those quarries?
When an application comes in, we have, you know, you talk about your 5-year housing land supply at a district level and land availability. We have our local aggregates assessment, which requires us to, and a policy in the plan that reflects that, current plan which reflects that, which is that we need a 10-year land bank for crushed rock and a 7-year land bank for sand and gravel. So we're just consulting on our LAA with for the year of 2024 with the Aggregates Working Party, and we're just awaiting a letter from them to approve. Well, it's not approve, is it? It's agree to the figures. So it will be published in the next week or so.
Do you have a suspicion as to whether or not we'll pass?
We have a land bank for sand and gravel. Yes, we exceed the 7 years for that sand and gravel. Our crushed rock is slightly below the 10 years at 9.03 years, I believe.
Thank you. Councillor Carrington.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 quick questions, but I think this conversation we're having really underlines the challenges faced by local government when national government changes the rules. And there are always good reasons and democratic accountability for changing the rules. Certainly, a lot of that happened under the previous government, and that pace has picked up extraordinarily under the current Labour government. And whether it's minerals and waste authorities or local planning authorities, everybody is scrabbling desperately to keep up. Indeed, the legislation often scrabbles to keep up with the announcements which are made. 2 specific questions, and you've touched on one already. Firstly, I was disturbed to hear you mention capacity issues. I absolutely understand. Planners, policy planners included, are an increasingly rare species, and I say that declaring an interest as an endangered member of the endangered species. But can you give us an assurance that those capacity issues are now behind us, or do they continue? And my second question relates to, I think, what Councillor Baxter asked. Can you give us an assurance that when it comes to dealing with individual applications, we have a sufficiently robust minerals and waste local plan, irrespective of which route we go down for its updating, to make sure that the decisions taken by the Planning Committee are robust? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. With regard to team capacity, we are carrying 2 vacancies within the team. We did advertise last year to fill those vacant posts, but unfortunately no suitable candidates applied, and which reflects your comments about policy planners. We will be revisiting that recruitment process. Although we've got those 2 vacancies within the policy team, we consider we've got sufficient capacity with consultancy support to meet the proposed timetable. With regard to the robustness of the decision-making process, the current local plan is functioning well. We produce what's called an annual monitoring report, which assesses the the robustness of the policies, and the obviously planning applications are determined in accordance with the local plan and other material considerations. Once a local plan that's going through its development, once it gets to Regulation 19 consultation, because that is the proposed submission plan, that is the plan you intend to submit for examination, it becomes it has more weight in the planning process and more of a material consideration in the decision-making process. So once we reach Regulation 19, we have a more robust and more robust consideration using the new emerging local plan policies.
Thank you again, Alison. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you for indulging me. Could I just ask for absolute clarity, which month or which meeting will be the first time that the residents of the county who responded to the 2024 consultation, when will they find out whether their arguments have been accepted?
In the Minerals and Waste Development Scheme, we're looking at taking our Regulation 19 consultation out for consultation for a 6-week period in June and July this year. And that will be accompanied by what's called a statement of consultation, and that will reflect the comments of all consultees. There will be a report that reports on the consultee comments, and there will also be a table that shows how we've dealt with those. Thank you.
Thank you again, Alison. Do we have any more questions or comments? No? Thank you very much. Right, this concludes our discussion on the item. We shall now move to the conclusions. I move that the committee, following throughout consideration of all the relevant information, supports the recommendations to the executives as detailed on page 15-16 of the report. And I move that the summary of the comments be passed to the executive for consideration on the 3rd of February 2026. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Thank you, that is agreed. We shall now move to a short comfort break, because I don't know about you, but I'm out of drink and need to go. Welcome back, everybody. Just give you a minute to take your seat. Thank you. Item 8, Toynton St Peter Surface Water Scheme. This report is found on pages 69 to 103 of the agenda pack and will be presented by Ashley Myers, Flood Risk Programme Coordinator.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. So yes, as per my report, we are seeking executive decision on the award of contract and delivery for the surface water scheme in Toynton St Peter. There's within the village, there's been a number of flood events over the years.
Ashley, I don't mean to be rude. Can you just be conscientious of your mic, please, so it won't get picked up on the audio for the recording?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, there's been a number of multiple flood events over the years in Toynton St Peter, dating back to 2007. Over the last 18 months or so, we've been undertaking a number of detailed investigation, feasibility and design work to understand the surface water issues within the community. Investigations have shown that the existing draining network is in a very poor and unmaintainable condition at the moment, and there is insufficient capacity to suitably deal with intense rainfall events. So as such, we've developed a scheme which is looking to improve the surface water situation within the village, which includes replacing and increasing the capacity of the existing system with introduction of new gullies, chambers and surfacing and watercourse cleansing. The scheme is proposed to span, as per the Appendix B within my report, from Fenside Road through to Eastville Road, Chapel Lane and Church Lane, so effectively providing improvements to the entirety of the village. The scheme is to be delivered in 6 phases over an approximately 19-week period, maintaining access throughout and keeping disruption to a minimum. And we will be working with Councillor Hume as the local member to help engage the community on that, and we've already engaged Councillor Hume directly. Technical Services Partnership will be delivering the scheme on the Floods and Water Team's behalf, and they have delivered previous schemes and got a vast experience in delivering these works for the Floods and Water Team. Again, as per the report, our anticipated capital works cost is 760,000. And due to the proximity of locations, we are also proposing to introduce a minor works job under the same contract at Chapel Lane, Merriman Fen, where we know there's a small surface water issue there. So there's potentially £85,000 of work at Chapel Lane to be incorporated within that contract. This is a practice we've done in other locations just to enable efficiencies and reduce costs in terms of mobilisation contractors, and actually speeds up the delivery of smaller jobs within the programme because we've got a contractor utilised. So that being said, with Toynton St Peter of 760,000, Church Lane, Merriman Fen 85,000, and then incorporating a tender assessment contingency figure of 101,000, we're anticipating the contract cost of being £946,400, and this is to be funded by the Floods and Water Capital budget, which is available as per my report. So, yeah, open to any questions from the committee.
Thank you for that. Do you have any questions? Councillor Bailey Robinson.
Thank you. Yeah, just regarding the 12% tender contingency, just acknowledging that there's a bit of an uncertainty with excavating deep into the ground. Is that contingency sufficient? And could we go over that?
As far as we're aware, and given our experience in delivering these type of projects, 12% is kind of a common figure that we incorporate. So yeah, we're comfortable that that should cover what we need.
Brilliant. And just with the phase 4, I know that's 5 weeks just for those residents on that Eastville Road. What specific measures are in place to support those residents, especially the elderly, who might be heavily impacted?
So subject to obviously approval of the scheme, we normally engage with the successful contractor early on to actually meet with impacted residents and sort of let a drop and do formal engagement, which we will support along with our comms and parish council and local members. So there will be engagement work happening with all affected residents, and we will ensure throughout the process that access is maintained and there is as minimal disruption as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that engagement with residents and the parish council. Appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reeve.
Thank you. What design aspects have changed? I guess it's a more modern structure. You've noticed that a lot of the existing infrastructure is no longer maintainable and has to be completely replaced. Is it just that we're working to a new standard now? And I'm just thinking going forward, what's going to stop what we're putting into this coming period becoming unmaintainable in the future? Is it a different design structure, different construction? What's going to guarantee it's going to last? Thank you.
So the existing system that's there now in the main is actually Victorian brick arc culverts. So they've been there for a number of years that we've found through our CCTV have all started to collapse and deteriorate and the bricks have fallen in. So our revised construction will be actual pipe culvert, concrete and polypipe where required. So much longer lifespan and much more easily maintainable with new access points for maintenance going forward, which will be installed that aren't currently there.
Thank you.
Councillor Reuben Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. With the 12% contingency which has been evaluated there, is that something is it 12% you put on basically projects like this, or is there specific things which you think may increase? Thank you.
So that 12% is calculated by our colleagues in Technical Services Partnership, and that is based on our active risk register and potential of finding utilities or assets that aren't currently recorded. So one thing that we found within our investigations, there was actually 8 new chambers that weren't recorded anywhere and no one was aware of. So it's to account for, as we are digging into the ground, there could be additional assets that come along. So that's been calculated based on our risk register and potential of further clashes and other assets that we may not be aware of but could discover while on site.
Thank you, Ashley. Do we have any other questions or comments? Councillor Martin.
Just a quick question, really. Is there any future development coming to that area, as in housing, or I did read something very briefly about a new farm, chicken farm or something just around the corner, and would that have any impact on the infrastructure you're putting in?
As far as I'm aware, it's maybe something that I need to take away, but I'm not aware of any developments in the area, and our work will be completely separate to any potential developments. Ultimately, obviously, we are upgrading the surface water asset within the vicinity that new developments could potentially utilise, but that is always kind of separate and with, obviously, planning colleagues to take that forward. But I'm not aware of any immediate applications that are proposing to go in.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Right, thank you very much. That concludes this discussion on the item. We should now move to the conclusions. I move that the committee, following through consideration of the relevant information, supports the recommendations to the executive councillors as detailed on page 69 of the agenda pack. I move that a summary of the comments be passed to the executive councillors for consideration. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Now move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. That is agreed. Item 9, Flood Risk Water Management Capital Programme. This report is found on pages 105 to 112, the agenda pack, and will be presented by Ashley Myers.
Yep. Thanks again, Chair. So as per the report, this is to provide an overview of the current flood risk and water management capital programme and our forward programme pipeline. So it's for the Scrutiny Committee to kind of acknowledge the programme and pipeline works and recommends that the Executive Councillor for Environment and the Executive Director of Place continue to work with the Floods and Water team and relevant partner organisations to continue to develop this programme. So just kind of briefly running through some of the key highlights of the report. As per the current programme, in 2025, we delivered 3 surface water schemes across the county. The first being Kirkby-on-Bain surface water scheme, which funding for that was utilised via the devolution monies, £951,000, and that was similar to Taunton Tate Peter, which saw a replacement increase in capacity in the surface water system there. The second scheme was in Long Bennington, which was a second phase of wider work that had gone on in Long Bennington to see sort of surface water improvements in the southern section of the village, immediately outside the primary school, again increasing capacity and flows within the surface water system. And then more recently, the third scheme was in Scotwick, which was a culvert replacement scheme, which started in September 25 and completed just before Christmas. That, again, was to aid with the repair of multiple collapses within the system and make good and improve where possible. So as far as we're aware, all sort of the works undertaken in those 3 locations have provided benefit, and we've had evidence from residents to suggest issues that were previously seen have not been seen again. So we're happy that those 3 have been a success. Going down to figure 1 within my report, that is just an overview of the existing programme that we're working on and the estimated timelines in which we will be taking those forward. So as I've mentioned, we go through 3 stages when developing a scheme, which is the feasibility and hydraulic modelling to determine whether a scheme is feasible, and then it will move on to optioneering and detailed design, and then through to construction. So that gives an overview of the existing programme. To coincide that, figure 2 within my report also shows the pipeline of potential capital schemes that are in development. So that list there is currently being taken forward by consultants to understand all flooding sources, undertaking hydraulic modelling, feasibility and optioneering to fully understand the issues, and then potential options that could be taken forward and brought into the wider capital scheme for delivery. So that is the existing programme over the next 3 to 5 years. Alongside that, we also have a number of property flood resilience projects that have been managed by the team. The first being DEFRA funded following Storm Babette and Storm Henk. There was a property flood resilience repair grant for those 2 storms, in which £5,000 of grant was brought forward to residents to help protect their properties and repair any damage from a property flood resilience aspect. So we've brought in over £803,000 for Storm Babette, supporting 164 applications for residents in Lincolnshire, and then 54 applications for the Storm Henk grant, which has seen £264,000 being brought in to deliver that work. Alongside that, following the executive that voted in £1 million of additional funding for residents that were impacted in January 2025 floods. That's a scheme that's ongoing, and we are currently still inviting applications up until the end of March of this year to potentially support up to 200 households to take up £5,000 of grant again to install property flood resilience measures. We currently have 59 applications received, and we're, as I say, working up until March to bring in more applications to support more residents under that grant. The final thing I just wanted to mention to the committee is following the storm events that we've had over the last number of years, the amount of recommendations and issues and impacts that have come out of Section 19 investigations has been far vast than resource that can allow not only in Lincolnshire County Council but the risk management authorities that we work closely within the Lincolnshire Partnership. we've had to develop a tool within Lincolnshire to actually prioritise that work based on parameters to actually take forward resource and allocate that funding in the best possible way to communities that need it most and have been impacted the most. So that's a tool that we've been developing within the team, and we are looking to finalise and use going forward to help shape that prioritisation of works and the capital programme beyond the existing that we've currently got. So again, happy to have any questions on that.
I think it's fantastic that, you know, things like this that are recorded, that are out there, it just makes people aware that there is flood resilience grants available. While there's still money in the pot, you know, it's vital that these people do take up the opportunity to apply for that funding. So, yes, we'll move to questions if anybody has any questions. Councillor Bailey Robinson.
Thank you. Just looking at the table, just the ones that are already commissioned, so all of them have, except for the Spalding and Acacia Avenue one, that we're just dependent on the internal drainage board. What are we doing to sort of pressure them to make sure that our works aren't being delayed for the 27-28?
That scheme in terms of the phase 1 delivered by the IDB is actually going on site next week. So that's due for completion from by the end of this calendar year, so the end of that. In terms of Acacia Avenue, it is one that we are seeking grant and aid funding for as well, because it's potentially a multi-million-pound scheme, the scale of that. So we are also waiting on guidance from DEFRA in terms of the new funding rules that are coming live in April. So we will be submitting our outline business case once we know more in terms of that funding mechanism to draw in funding to actually deliver that scheme.
So we can't foresee any risk of it being delayed from what?
No, I suppose the only caveat is that obviously it's dependent on a business case for external funding. So it's whether we can get that approval and the funding is there to deliver it. So that's our anticipated timeline in terms of approval and getting the funding necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. As regards the repair grant scheme, obviously £5,000 grant to help property owners, have we actually had any feedback from the 218 residents who received it as to how useful it was to them? Have they got any comments about how it can be improved? Or basically, is it a successful scheme and use of £1 million? Thank you.
So we have actually just been working with our comms and engagement team to actually develop a survey form. So we have actually started to send that out to the residents that have been on that scheme. We will be obviously looking to collate that feedback, and then as part of that work we are planning on producing a lessons learned paper to determine the effectiveness and sort of whether that work has been beneficial and the grant has helped. So that's something that, again, we would be happy to bring forward to committee once we're at that stage.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. It's encouraging, especially in my part of the world where some of the properties were suffering floods, Henk, Babette and subsequent. So my eye is naturally drawn to Gretford being top of the list on table 2, and also so Tallington, which is quite some way down the table, is subject to optioneering, which I don't think is a word, but I can at least extrapolate from context what it means. I assume that's something to do with the Anglian Water contribution. Is there any news on what's likely to happen with that? Do I need to go and bang on the table somewhere to say, give us our money? And if I was successful, would it still have to wait until after the orange ones, or could it be expedited? And if you want the questions together, do you want to answer that one first, if that's okay?
Yeah, not a problem. So, we, in terms of Tallington, we are, engaged with Anglian Water. There has been some discussions around the responsibility of the asset running through Main Road in Tallington. So there's ongoing discussions between ourselves and Anglian Water. They have committed some funding towards developing the scheme, but following the sort of the responsibility discussions that are ongoing, there will be further optioneering work that needs to be done in terms of what option is most viable for that asset within Tallington. So there is optioneering and design work still needed to be done, which will, subject to how quickly that happens, could push it up the programme, as you've alluded to.
Thank you. That conversation has been going on for years already. It's been certainly before, I can't remember which one came first, Henkel, Babette. It's a known problem, and it's the only thing that takes longer to discuss is Network Rail's responsibility and involvement. But that's not a very happy competition. My second question was going to be about the same as Councillor Martin, about the property flood resilience. 5,000. If you've had your home flooded and your kitchen and dining room ruined, and you're in temporary accommodation for sometimes more than a year, £5,000 is small consolation really, but every little helps, I guess. Are there restrictions on how that money is spent? Because I've had a conversation with a resident not too long ago where they said, I was told that I needed to get a survey and I was given some money to do that survey, but I was told who I had to give that money to. Does that sound plausible?
Yeah, so the two schemes have been run slightly differently. So the Storm Babette and Storm Henk grant, which was offered by DEFRA, that did require a survey to be undertaken, in which we used RAB consultants to actually support residents to undertake that work. So following the survey that was undertaken, that would have recommendations which the grant money could be utilised to deliver on the property. In terms of the LCC £1 million that was awarded in 2025, a survey isn't required, and it is more for the homeowner to actually take away and undertake the work with their own contractors, in which we will then commission RB consultants to go out and undertake a post verification in the work that's been done to ensure that that money has been spent effectively and will be providing resilience. So there has been some slight variation in the two schemes that have been delivered. The reasoning for the LCC grant being delivered slightly differently was that executive members at the time felt that they wanted to expedite the process and allow homeowners who are probably best placed to understand where flows and impacts come from, the areas that need improvement within their property to benefit them going forward.
Thank you. I've got no problem with RIB consultants. I'm sure they're very good. But you're saying that residents don't have a choice, and can you confirm that RIB have been through some sort of tendering procurement process?
Yeah, so RAB were procured via the EA PFR national framework, which all local authorities are allowed to bid into. So that's how they were procured. In terms of the Storm Bet and Henk grant, even though a survey was required, homeowners could source that survey themselves. We just offered as an authority to RAB to speed that process up and actually allow residents a suitable consultant to undertake that work.
Councillor Carrington.
Thank you, Chairman. A quick comment and a quick question. The comment is simply to say thank you very much for the report. And just to underline how important these local drainage schemes can be to those individual communities, all those communities set out in Figure 1 and Figure 2, they don't get much publicity, they don't get much traction, they are incredibly important. And it's also the case that we often have, and I'm thinking of Scotwick, for example, where the work that we did was done in parallel with another flood risk partner, Anglian Water, because there was groundwater infiltration of the foul water system. It's sometimes quite complicated, but the value of this work that the county does, often in conjunction with other partners, is incredibly important to those local people. So thank you to you and the team who put this together. Just going back to the property flood resilience scheme, absolutely excellent news. two questions about that. One, going forward, is that £1 million enough? And given the fact that we are in a climate change situation, given the fact that we have so much more and so much more regular severe flooding instances, do we need to have to look at embedding this as a long-term facility rather than just in response to, in this case, Babette and Henk? And secondly, could you just unpick for me, is this the same funding pot as some of the local property flood resilience work that's been done under the groundwater scheme, which certainly has been very valued in my ends, or is it a completely different funding pot? Because I think DEFRA was involved in that one as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, so just in terms of the second question, the work that the PFR work for groundwater is a completely separate pot, and that's being funded through the Project Groundwater scheme that's FCRIP funded via DEFRA, so they are two separate pots. In terms of the first question, I don't know whether, Matt, I know you've had some conversations around further funding on PFR. I don't know whether...
Yeah, thank you. And it's an interesting one, actually. We would like to continue to support people, obviously, as much as we can to become more resilient and recover from when they have been flooded, and the Property Flood Resilience Scheme has been effective in that. But it is down to individual homeowners to make that decision as to whether they wish to take up the grant. We are there to help, support, offer the grant, guide them through the process as much as we can. But the take-up, in truth, hasn't possibly been as great as we had hoped. And I think that is possibly some people's perceptions as to what that means if they are, for them as homeowners, if they are sort of admitting that they have been flooded by having to install flood resilience measures. I do think that is an element to that thought process. So, I think it should be embedded as we move forward, because it can really help people in that, certainly the recovery phase, and better protecting for any future events. But we haven't got that control over, sort of forcing people to take it up. It is an individual decision as to whether they take up on the grant.
Chairman, if I could just come back on that, just going back to the point, and thank you, Matthew, the point that Ashley made, that you've got comms on it, you're looking at the lessons learned. I think when we get to the end of this programme, perhaps at some time in the autumn, it would be great if you could come back to this committee and give us an update on how well it's gone, and we can feed that perhaps into a discussion of how we go forward. Obviously, it has to be individual householders who take primary responsibility. It's just a question of what we as lead local flood authority might be able to do in that context, because we do have responsibilities, although precious few powers, but we also have expertise and a place to discuss these matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shreve.
Thank you. In terms of the Lincolnshire County Council Flood Resilience Grant, I understand that was originally a £1 million fund. I'm just wondering how much of that remains, and is there a time limit on when anybody can claim on that? Thank you.
Yes, so I think currently, in terms of applications that have come in, we have spent just under half of that money. But as I say, we are still open to applications and inviting people up until the 31st of March 26. The scheme itself is running until the 31st of March 27 for sort of the installation work and the sign-off of that. So, yeah, currently, I think, as I mentioned, we've got 59 applications at potentially £5,000 each. So we are, as I mentioned, inviting more people, and I know there was another batch of invites that went out this week to residents that could apply. So we're hoping that number will creep up sort of before the end of March.
Thank you.
Am I right in thinking that there's the you send out for people that can potentially qualify for the grant, and then there's people who can apply for the grant?
So for the LCC scheme, it has been an invite only based on information that we hold within the team in terms of residents that have been flooded, and we have got record of. In terms of the previous Storm Babette grant, which is no longer open, it is coming to an end now, that was an invite, anyone could apply, sort of expression of interest process.
Thank you for that. Do you have any more additional comments or questions? No? Right, that concludes the discussion for this item. We'll now move to conclusions. There's a suggested action on page 105 of the agenda pack. That the current programme and pipeline works be acknowledged. The Executive Council for the Environment, the Executive Down for Place recommend to continue the work. Flood team and relevant partner organisations continue to develop the flood risk water management schemes. Item 10, work programme. Now is the time for the standard work programme item on the agenda, which is set out on pages 113 to 120. This provides the committee with an opportunity to review the work programme and suggest topics for further consideration. I would like to ask Simon Evans to present this item, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Just drawing the committee's attention to pages 114 onwards, where the confirmed items are listed. There are no changes to the printed programme, so nothing to report, but I have noted during the earlier items that there are suggestions for items to be brought in to the future programme. But if there are any questions or any suggestions, I'll take them on board. Thank you.
Councillor Carrington.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if the Chair would look favourably on the offer made earlier by Mr. Ray Morgan to have a briefing on and it sounds incredibly dry, the regulation of water companies by the Environment Agency. And the reason I suggest that is not to send everybody to sleep, but it's actually hugely important, particularly at the moment where Anglian Water, who is our local undertaker, is increasingly refusing applications for major housing developments because they can't get the foul water away. And that whole business of their regulation and the way their budget process works has really big impacts on the spatial development of our county and beyond. So if the Chair was to look favourably on that offer from Morgan, I think we would have some very interesting information coming out of that.
Yep, totally agree, I do, yes. Fortunately, we do have officers and we have the executive with us today, so I think these valued comments today that have been taken up with additional to the work programme will be taken on board, I'm pretty sure of it, and we can incorporate them at some point within the future agendas. Do we have any more questions or comments regarding the work programme? Councillor Baxter?
Thank you. Yeah, it's in the items to be programmed, but given that Anglian Water weren't available today, it would be great to bring them back sooner rather than later, and not just for the reasons that Councillor Carrington said.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sure we can arrange for a future visit. Anyone else? No, thank you. Does it? This now concludes the discussion on the item. We can now note the work programme, including suggestions from the committee. That now concludes business for today. Thank you all for coming, and look forward to seeing you all at the next one. A safe journey home. Thank you.